Next subject is speed of product to the marketplace. And we'll look at change and innovation focused on bringing our products to the market. And GE is presenting this session, and we thank them for that. But I also want to thank Rich Goldsberry, an AEM director and president of Bobcat and Doosan International, who was instrumental in connecting AEM staff with GE. So we're pleased to have Beth Comstock with us today. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at GE, and she leads their marketing, their sales, license, and communications, but also oversees GE Ventures. Her current priorities include partnering with and investing in startups, developing new markets in analytics, energy, and affordable health, and making connections that spur innovation and grow brand value. And Beth will share her expertise on how to rapidly branch out with new products. She'll share with you how GE works with customers and partners to roll out products quickly and how they use innovation and crowdsourcing in the process. So please join me and welcome Beth Comstock to our conference. Beth.
Thank you all for having me. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. Many of us are partnered in many ways, and I'm pleased to be able to share some perspectives. What I thought I would do would be to start with a scan of the world. You guys have spent the past day and a half looking at trends. I'll try to make some sense of it from the kind of industries that we're all in. Then dig in a little bit to how GE is taking some of this and turning it into action, hopefully for a bit of provocation for discussion we want to end up the time with. I really titled this a look at market innovation and then linking it to speed to market. You may be wondering why a marketing person would talk about innovation, and hopefully I answer that for you by the end of the hour. The first thing I want to set the stage with is just every year we go out and we talk to people like you around the world. We talk to tens of thousands of people who are leading companies to say, what's the state of innovation? What do you see? From Korea to Saudi Arabia, to Canada, to Mexico, to the US, 30 different countries. And these are the themes, and my guess is they'll resonate with you. We see this time and time again. We're all struggling with the need for more creative individuals in our organization, for all the reasons you heard from Luke and others. But let's be honest, we don't know the first thing to do with a creative person. They kind of scare us. We don't have the right environment to keep them. We don't know how to feed and care for them. So we struggle. We know we need more. Increasingly in the world, we're dealing with big, complicated problems. We're talking about big industries, global industries, the rise of technology, and it's calling a need for different kinds of partnerships, big company and small, governments and private industries. But we also know that partnerships are really, really hard. We need to partner for speed, for sharing risk and reward. We know we need it, but we don't really know how to do it well. Increasingly, no matter where you go in the world, we know we're in business to make a profit, but increasingly, our employees, our customers, we want that profit to be tethered to a purpose. Most of us here are helping build industries, build markets. There's an incredible mission in what we do. And finally, that tension between global and local. If you're in a global company, you try to innovate and create products that scale globally, but they really have to resonate locally. And local innovation is only so good. It's better if it can help and go other places. So these are the challenges we're all confronted with. I think you'll see that theme carry through what I want to talk about today. Now I'm going to quickly scan some of the trends that are on our radar. And many of them you've heard about today. You heard from the folks, you've heard over the past few days. You heard from the folks at Singularity. I think there are probably about 13 different technologies we're tracking. Everything from certainly the internet, cloud computing, 3D printing, robotics, artificial intelligence. You get vertigo just thinking about all of these. I think for all of us as business leaders, a couple of things to think about. We do live in exponential times. The reality is these technologies are meshed. It is a physical meets digital world. You cannot avoid that. We're at the intersection of the hardware we make and the data that is going to surround it. Driverless car, it's coming. It's going to be driverless plane, train. 3D printing is made possible in large part because of the digitization, because of what's in the cloud. For us, it's understanding the mesh of these technologies. They're growing exponentially because one depends on the other. And I think getting comfortable and having folks in our companies that understand the speed and the intersection and how do we monetize is really the leadership challenge of all of us in the next 10 to 15 years. Data, connectivity, it's happening. We've all seen what's happened when the world's connected, 3 billion people online. We see that playing out. Now we're at a new inflection point. What happens when 50 billion machines come online? Incredible opportunity, all kinds of scary scenarios, but it's there for us to grab. We're living in a manufacturing revolution. You guys spent a lot of yesterday. You saw Jay's car out front. I love seeing that 3D printed car. But what I think for all of us to think about is manufacturing is getting much cheaper. It's connected to the cloud. We're looking at scenarios for brilliant factories where you're basically manufacturing in the cloud. And it's becoming much more distributed. We don't need the big centers of manufacturing that we grew up with. It can be done a lot faster. You heard Jay talk about a micro factory. If not us, who else is going to do that? Entrepreneurs are rising. I just got back from China and Korea. You want to see the impact in countries like that. Xiaomi is now the third largest cell phone company in 4 years. Is disrupting Samsung and Apple from China. And a lot of this is happening for all the reasons we've talked about in the technologies, cloud computing, the mesh of these technologies, the access to manufacturing. It's a digitized global marketplace. An entrepreneur would need to spend $5 million in 1999 just to get started. Today, it's $50,000, thanks to cloud computing, Amazon Web Service. So it's an opportunity for all of us to think about how do we extend our capabilities. And on a disruptive perspective, if it's that cheap, who's thinking about disrupting us? And how do we harness that from a supply chain? And the nature of jobs are changing. We're thinking a ton about this. We have a whole workforce looking at the future of work. The idea of the physical meets the digital world. It's a digital mechanical engineer that we need in the future. It's a digital mechanical engineer we need now. Do you need an IT department or a knowledge department? Do you need a marketing department or an IT department? Increasingly, these jobs are meshing as the world around us is meshing. And finally, the very nature of technology is changing in the sense that the very nature of innovation is changing in the sense we all grew up in a world where it was all about innovating a product and getting it to market. Now it's not enough. The product does not stand alone anymore. The product is part of a system. It's connected to another product. It's all about how things interact with one another. And huge opportunities for business models that aren't just beholden on a core product. It's not just a jet engine. It's how the jet engine relates to the entire operation of the airline. So for all of us, huge opportunities, and we're going to have to grab hold of these because there are a lot of forces out there that will do it if we don't. So with that as a backdrop, here's how we're thinking about it at GE. The first thing is we're a 130-year-old company. We know a thing or two about what it means to be resilient. You don't live to be 130 without knowing change and harnessing when it's important. The other thing to know about us is that we're a technology-first company. We're all about big honking things, a jet engine, a locomotive. These machines are like many of yours. We make these things of marvel. And because we're a technology-led company, that's our strength. What often doesn't happen is getting us tethered with where the market's going. Some of the changes I just talked about, making sure that technology is tethered to a real need, adapted to where the world is going. And so over the past decade, we've created a system that's market innovation and technology innovation, and creating teams that are sort of market back and technology led. And for any business leader, that basically is a formula for tension. And that's by design, to create the tension that says, let's get the market view and the technology view. And let's try to figure out how do we harness that tension and create innovation. That's been what we've tried to do with marketing in our company. And I think it's an unused aspect of marketing in many businesses, especially business enterprise companies, where you need somebody who wakes up every day, a force, a voice, a champion for where the world's going, what your customers need that they may not even know they need, and to translate that back and mesh it with the great capabilities with the product. So let me show you how we're breaking that down, and then let's talk. So one of the first things we did about a decade ago was we said, okay, you have to think about the entire system. We launched something with a very cute name, but it had a very serious intent. We called it Eco-Imagination. It was all about harnessing our technology to partner with our customers to deliver cleaner, more efficient solutions for the environment. We did a whole host of things, discovery sessions with customers where we'd say, okay, we give you $1 million. What technology are you going to invest in 10, 15 years from now? We set ourselves with a bunch of partners, startups, governments. We held ourselves accountable for our own kind of delivery in terms of taking down emissions. But the headline here is it was a horizontal effort across the whole company. It was a theme in the market that said we're going to innovate. We're going to put resources, both technology and market resources, to figuring out new products that deliver what our customers need around energy efficiency. Today, it's a $30 billion a year revenue line of businesses across the company because we had to force that thinking to say our customers and us together have to innovate. We have to be part of the ecosystem. We can't do it alone. The other thing we've had to do is take market resources and technology teams together in market and live in the market. This is a picture of a midwife in Indonesia holding a handheld ultrasound. It's a great technology. It's very space age. It's basically ultrasound in your pocket. It looks like your cell phone. And it's a very high-end application. But in Indonesia, they don't have radiologists in great abundance. They barely have doctors. And so babies are often born through the help of midwives. So can we take that technology designed for very sophisticated use and make it almost like Fisher-Price simple, red light, green light? Use this best technology and adapt it to what's needed. You just don't decide that. You have to live with the midwives. You have to spend time understanding how they use the equipment. Technologists together with marketers who understand the use cases. We've now created about 8 innovation centers around the world, and that's their purpose, is to bring together technologists, designers, marketers with customers. I was in Chengdu, China last week, in probably our most exciting innovation center that was designed for affordable health in China. There's like 90 million people in the Sichuan province, and we brought in a whole host of physicians who were I got to see it, working real time, and we had been out in the field with them, bringing their stories back. It's just an ongoing source of innovation. The headline is it's helping China, but what's really exciting is these value products are going to come back and help develop markets like the US, where we have big healthcare challenges. So we've had to force that kind of reorientation in our company. People had to say, yeah, I have to get out of Milwaukee. I'm used to designing a really great digital X-ray in Milwaukee. Now you mean I have to do it in China? Yeah, you do. You have to literally move those business lines to the markets where some of these new models are being developed. We've had to create a protected class of ideas, and again, I think this is something that all of us as leaders need to think about. Jeff Immelt, about a decade ago, challenged us to say, how do we make sure we don't lose sight of growing from within? And so we created something at the time we called Imagination Breakthroughs. This effort's about a decade. It's had different names and themes, but it's largely been the same, which is basically forcing innovation to happen, but at the same time protecting it. You have a good idea, but you have to make sure quarter to quarter it doesn't get killed when you need to make your numbers year to year. And so here's a picture of something like solid oxide fuel cells that we're incubating out of the lab into the marketplace. I'll give you a great example. I've recently started working very closely overseeing our lighting division. Our LED lighting business was incubated in a little garage. And thank goodness, because LED is now growing at a rate of like 55%, and our core is declining. The incandescent bulb is over. And thank goodness, for a decade, we had a little skunk works that incubated LED technology, because now it's on the way to becoming the invention that is necessary for a total transformation of a 130-year-old business. You have to protect these ideas. It can't be someone's part-time job, and you have to protect them. And there's a whole set of measurements we can talk about if you want to dig into that. The other thing that I think is really hard for technology companies like mine, and probably like yours, is that we love technology. Technology can solve everything. But the reality is, with digitization, with these systems coming together, often the technical solution is not the favored one. And I think any of you who've studied what's happening in the solar market will agree. GE's had great solar technology, but right now the innovation is being led by the companies like SolarCity that are able to integrate the technology together and create a really simple, frictionless system for a consumer or a small business that said, let's just finance that for you. So in many cases, increasingly, finance and digitization come together to create a new business model, and the technology is just an afterthought. In a digitized, meshed world, this is something we all have to think about, and you have to plan for. You have to protect a sense of capability and create a capability. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about the industrial internet, because for a company like mine, this is the future. This is where we are putting our now and our tomorrow dollars, because we think this mesh of the technology in the physical world and the digital world is defining our future. It's driving our service business. It really is creating a new line of business model innovation and a new line of product innovation. So first of all, what is the industrial internet? For us, it is that Internet of Things. What happens when 50 billion machines come online? When a jet engine talks to another jet engine. When a locomotive talks to headquarters. When a service rep on their mobile can talk to a locomotive before it gets there to understand what it needs. There's a huge wave of productivity that all of us are going to be able to derive from this. And it's about the data, the analytics. Let me give you a couple of examples of how we're thinking about it. We think it's going to unleash a wave of productivity for all of our customers. You're in these businesses. You know that locomotives are actually designed to move a lot faster than the average 21 miles a day they move. It's because there's a lot of constraint and backup in the system. If you can liberate where your assets are, if you can understand where your assets are, and better move and understand the dynamics, even moving that locomotive 1 more mile a day generates $200 million of opportunity for a railroad. That's real productivity. The average hospital, a nurse in a hospital, spends 20% of his or her time looking for things. If you have sensors and you're able to track and understand where the assets are and get them from point A to B faster, you liberate a lot of productivity, a lot of throughput for hospitals desperately in need of efficiency. So let me give you a couple of examples of how we're starting to apply it and then talk about how we do the innovation around it. The best one is something that we call Power Up, which is really just putting a software layer around wind farms. So it works in various ways. At the individual wind turbine layer, you put sensors and controls in your wind turbine, and basically you can start to understand at a much localized level, where's the wind coming from, LiDAR, radar, all kinds of systems. So you can change remotely the pitch of the wind turbine to optimize the wind. Then that one turbine talks to the next turbine and says, I'm optimizing my wind, getting ready for you, and it's sort of like a beautiful synchronized choreography of these wind turbines. And then at the whole farm level, they can message back to the utility saying, hey, wind is really optimized really well right now. Maybe it's better to use wind and not gas, or wind, not coal, or wind or whatever. It gives you better mix optimization. We're starting to see in our customers who use this 30% savings. And what they really don't need is more capital. They don't need to put in more wind turbines. They can optimize their output just by software. For all of us, I think that's pretty sobering if we're just in a hardware business. But together, we liberate a lot of productivity. We create a lot of opportunity. And that's why we're investing so much in this. But how do we do it? I mean, we're in a lot of different industries, whether it's power, locomotive, airlines. It's the same kind of need. So what we had to do was create central kind of zones of innovation to make this happen. The first thing we did was we created a software center of excellence in San Ramon. Today we've got about 1,200 programmers, data scientists, developers who are working in concert with our businesses to develop that data layer around the hardware. Back to that future of work, we need digital mechanical engineers. You need chief digital officers alongside your chief technology officer. So we're kind of forcing that technology infusion. And what I've been leading is a commercial center of excellence as well that brings in new kinds of commercial models, new sales, marketing, product development teams that work with all of our customers to understand what is it that we're going to value. So we found you have to sort of centralize some of that innovation to create the incubation of it, and over time, it will be very distributed back into our business units. Finally, let me just end with a couple of thoughts on getting some of this to market. And I'd say our biggest challenge, and my guess is this is one of your challenges, is just we're complicated. In our best day, we're not easy. And it's because we're in many countries, many businesses, many kinds of functions. I already explained to you, you have a centralized system to incubate some of these things. You've got to apply it regionally, and you have to work it within a business. That's kind of chaos unless you're well organized. So we've been on a real journey to take all of this, help us make it simpler, faster, more effective. And I'd say the biggest liberation for us has been an effort we call FastWorks. But it's basically just taking everything I explained to you over the past decade that we've developed it and kind of packaged it, and really, I think, harnessing more of an entrepreneurial spirit. We have used our efforts in Silicon Valley and around the world with startups, whether it's investing in them, mostly it's partnering with them, to help reinforce and remind us of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit that's frankly at the heartbeat of all of our companies. It's where we all started. So what is FastWorks? Well, it's taking a lot of change management capabilities that we've invested in our company over decades. It's taking things like lean and agile, and then it's infusing them with some of this entrepreneurial thinking. There's been a big movement around something called lean startup. Maybe you've read some of the books or you've participated. Well, we harness lean startup to reinvigorate our thinking. And so what lean startup tells you is that basically you can get things to market much faster than you imagine. And there are a couple of core tenets that have really started to change the culture at GE. One is this idea of a minimally viable product. Now, clearly, we're all going to fly home today. You don't want a minimally viable jet engine. It's not what I'm talking about. But there are a lot of ways you can test and learn and get products into the market a lot faster by creating something that's kind of a prototype. It's at least an early application that you get feedback before you go and design the totally optimized system. And in the engineering companies like we all have, we want the beautiful perfection. We want to wait 5 years for perfection when maybe 3 years for a fewer set of applications might be just fine. I'll give you an example of that. We've been working on a number of technologies in gas and diesel engines, something that's, I know, close to a lot of people in the room. We had one of our first project in FastWorks. It was going to take the team 5 years. Wow, competitively, that's really tough. We pulled it apart. We used this methodology. It was not that we lacked the technology or that we were waiting for some big technical breakthrough to get a couple of these engines to market. It was just a lot of the bureaucracy and process. It was the over-engineering. It was the putting every application for every possible scenario for every customer segment that might ever exist everywhere in the world. We get back, okay, what's a minimally viable product? How do you take that engine and put it into a marine setting first? Let's go test it. Let's find a willing customer who's willing to be a development partner. What are the leap of faith assumptions that you have to make? You're not going to have all the data to prove this. So it's a lot of leap of faith, giving people the culture, creating dedicated teams of people who are just focused. They're pulled out of their jobs for 6 months, up to 6 months, to go in and create these minimally viable programs. It's technology, marketing, sales, supply chain, all put together around these kind of leap of faith assumptions, getting customer feedback, getting validation real time. It can happen in hardware. This is technology that developed in software, but we've proven to ourselves, we've now scaled this. We have hundreds of these kinds of programs and teams There's kind of a light touch way. You can apply it to normal processes like ERP. And then there's sort of a heavyweight, dedicated new product introduction that this is really liberated. And more than anything, it's an operating system. It's a cultural mindset that says to your organization, this is okay. It's about speed. It's about innovation. Maybe it's to what Luke mentioned earlier. It's just iteration. It doesn't have to be a total breakthrough. It's something that gets us closer to what we know the customer values. So I think this has been and is transformative in terms of what we're doing. And again, I'm happy to dig into this in Q&A. I thought I'd dig into this a little bit more and just show you something. This chart is very complicated, and I apologize, but I thought it was worth sharing with you again of a how. So because we've been working with a lot of different startups, not just investing, but partnering with them, we've actually been bringing entrepreneurs in residence to kind of coach us through some of these projects and programs, sort of what would an entrepreneur do? And I think there's a couple of really important things to note. Entrepreneurs are really good at speed, at disruption. They covet what we have, all of us, which is scale, longevity, access to markets. So there's a really good partnership, if you can get it right, where we both have what the other wants. And it's also a reminder for companies like ours that, hey, there's something really powerful in our scale and our knowledge of our customers and markets. And if we could just move a little faster. And so part of what we've done is we've taken sort of a ventures mindset and adapted it to our new product introduction process. Many of you may have something like this. It's very simple. It's not like it's some breakthrough, but it's working. And I'll just spend a minute. So what we've set up, and I'll give you our oil and gas business as a good example, a growth board, largely led by the chief technology officer, but that has all the various kind of functions, the information technology, the market, the CFO. We assign an entrepreneur as part of that growth board. And they just treat their funding for new products like it's a venture portfolio. And they start to understand what's at that tender seed stage. And they ask a really important question. Not can we, but should we? Now here's a dirty secret that my colleagues hate me saying out loud, but I'm sure you'll recognize this. In most of our companies, we complain about not having a budget to get things launched, but most of us probably have more money than we need. And I think this is a big learning from startups, is they have nothing. They have nothing. Yes, they can raise funding. We have a lot more access to resources. And so the seed stage doesn't need to cost a lot. And usually what happens, your team will come in to you and go, okay, I need $5 million and see you in 20 months. I'll come back and I'll let you know how I'm going. Maybe the answer is I'll give you $250,000 and I want to see you in 6 months and I want to know if you validated your assumptions. I'm going to treat it with, I'm going to bring all these different functions together so everybody's making the decision. Then you go to the next phase. It's your launch phase. Okay, you got one customer. That's an important milestone. We'll fund you. Can you get to many customers? And then finally, optimize it for scale. That's what most of us know how to do really well. Our experience has been we often fund things for scale too early. So this sort of diagnosis of premature scaling, it's a real problem. You just think if I'm going to throw money at it, it's going to solve the problem. Usually it's throwing resources and it's validating those hypotheses earlier. So really what happens, and the finance teams love this, is your throughput's much more efficient. You're able to decide earlier, is this a good idea? Should we do it? Do I want to keep funding it? So you don't have to wait 3 years from now and find out you're over budget. You don't have the customers, the features you thought. So again, it's a basic discipline, but we've found by bringing teams together, focusing much earlier stage, kind of that fail fast, fail earlier perspective, that's really worked in, is really working in our culture. And then finally, just to wrap up, you heard from Jay Rogers yesterday. He's been a great partner to us. We've been trying to build our network of outside innovation to help us go faster, to help validate some of these early seed ideas. And frankly, as a proof point for some of the trends I mentioned earlier. So Jay mentioned to you yesterday the work we've done together to create First Build. So I won't go into that except to say, It's having a big impact in the company to say, is there a community of engineers that can help us solve this problem? Hey, you know what? We may not have all the best ideas. Or there may be things that we want to protect so closely internally, and other things that are better shared with the outside world to speed our innovation. And what's happening in Louisville is remarkable. If any of you have a chance to go there, open invitation, we'd love to host you. It's at University of Louisville. It's this incredible melding of students, of manufacturers in the community, of our own folks, solving really interesting engineering conundrums. How do I create a little micro kitchen? And it shows you the sort of true force of bringing outside innovation in. Here's a couple of other examples that I'll just punch out real quickly that I think are inspiration, and we hope have the potential to scale a lot more widely in our company. We've teamed with a startup called Quirky.com. Any of you can go there today if you have a great idea. Their mission is to make invention accessible, take ideas from anyone and help get them to market. We're partnering with them in a connected home space. But one of the interesting things was they took an air conditioner unit for us. We hadn't really innovated in over a decade. Our innovation is in some other areas. And we said, what can we do? In 3 months, they were able to take a smart algorithm from their community that was developed by an ex-employee of the US Department of Energy. He retired. He was in his 50s. Developed this smart algorithm, married it with our back infrastructure of the air conditioner, and totally redesigned and came up with, I think, the world's most beautiful air conditioner. And as it turns out, the world's smartest air conditioner. And in a matter of months, we were able to get out an air conditioner that's tethered to the internet, that can help anyone optimize their energy bill, turn it on and off from remote location. We could not have done that on our own. GrabCat, I love this example. This is a community of basically designers and engineers that write code. We said we need to take weight out of a basic boring bracket that's used in holding an aircraft engine onto a plane. We and our suppliers, we've pushed the limits of design. It's commoditized at this point. It's not something we're spending a lot of our time thinking about, but maybe there's someone outside GE who could help us solve this with 3D printing. We did a challenge. We put it out. We got thousands of ideas. The winning submission came from a 17-year-old engineering student in Indonesia who took 80% of the weight out of this part. We're now validating it. He's teamed with our research teams to see if his prototype actually works. But it's hugely exciting to think what can happen when you open up and you use digital channels to help you get faster and innovate. And then finally, this is a FastWorks project that's working its way through our system, is we teamed with Kaggle, which is a data science community. And we did another challenge, and we said, hey, we teamed with Air Alaska, one of our great partners. We said, let's release just a ton of data. We took like 30 days worth of data, everything from the flight control, everything from weather, everything that we had access to. We opened it up to the world's data scientists, and we said, here's the challenge. Help a plane navigate faster and smoother so that it's safer and it saves fuel and helps the environment. That was a challenge that too many data scientists couldn't ignore. Here's the headline. The winning algorithm came from a group of data scientists in Singapore. The number 2 winning algorithm came from an epidemiologist in Switzerland. These guys knew nothing about aviation. And now it's a series of algorithms and opportunities that are being developed into a product, that FastWorks style I mentioned to you, with our customer, looking to use algorithms to better dictate how we navigate. So hopefully this has given you some sense of, if nothing else, inspiration or maybe group therapy, that we're all trying to figure out how do we solve these problems. So let me wrap up here with a video that we use internally. We've done it a little bit externally, just to inspire our teams to think about kind of making innovation part of what they do.
Ideas are scary. They come into this world ugly and messy. Ideas are frightening because they threaten what is known. They are the natural-born enemy of the way things are. Yes, ideas are scary and messy and fragile. But under the proper care, they become something beautiful.
So a little wink at the end. I think now we're going to take some time. You guys are going to sort of have a little discussion group, and then we'll come back for Q&A. So what do we have, like 10 or 15 minutes for discussion? 5, 10? 10. So take 10 minutes. I think it's discussion at your table, and right, Helen? And then I'm happy to take some questions. Sure, I do have to run, but maybe we can walk and talk. Is that okay? Yeah, do it now. Actually. Great. Is that okay? Hi, I'm Beth. How are you? You want to just sit here and do this, or you want to go outside? I have to run, pretty much run afterwards. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, the first thing I think you have to do is bring integrated teams together. You need to have your technology and your market teams together to understand what can the technology do, what's the need in the market, and oftentimes we unbundle those. So you have to bring them together earlier in the process. And then what we try to do is get some early prototypes into the market. I think we've adopted very much the lean startup methodology that says, is there a minimally viable product? It's just good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Good enough, test it, get feedback, understand how it works, and then just continue to iterate your way through. In today's digital meets physical world, there's a lot of capability and capacity to innovate that way. A growth board is just a way of bringing sort of a venture capital mindset into a company that just says, we have a portfolio view, we have to place bets on a number of different things, some sure things, some things that are maybe a bit more speculative, but let's also stage gate the funding. Let's treat these ideas according to their growth. I mean, some ideas are very early and tender, they need to be taken care of. This assures, one, that you're funding at the right level, you're not giving it too much money, you're giving it just the right amount of money, and two, that you're giving it the right amount of protection and validation that it needs, and you're not expecting too much of it at too early a stage. comfort zones are not all bad, right? I mean, you do what you do well, and that's a great sense of strength. But the reality is you almost need these special forces in your company. We use marketing a lot in that way, that they have to live in the market. They have to be the voices of change. This is what's happening, and they actually have to be listened to, because no one likes hearing that things are changing. And then you have to be able to create small pilots, proof points that say, if this is true, what am I going to do about it? So I think you have to just not only have a view of change, but you have to have a way to work it through your system and constantly create mechanisms of sort of delegate the discomfort, if you will. Make sure people's job is to just bring that into the system. It's hard.
I love that. Delegate.
Yeah.
And what about, you had talked about protect the class of ideas that shift to new spaces. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I think we all look at what we have in front of us, and you think your innovation is just what's there, but you have to plan for what's next. But you don't know what's going to happen. So I think the idea that you put resources, that you protect, you create some optionality. So I'll give you an example in GE. I mean, we're in the big aircraft engine space. A decade ago, we started to see planes were getting a lot smaller, and we believed in the concept of a regional jet, but of a very small air taxi. We needed to incubate that. We needed to create, at that point, the market was so not clear. We partnered with Honda, who was creating a small jet plane. We made small jet engines, and together, over a decade, we protected and created an opportunity in a space that hadn't taken off, but we believed would. And now it's come to market, and the space is taking off. You don't just wake up one day and get ready for an air taxi space. Yeah, well, I do think that's right. We live in an age of just meshing of all kinds of technologies, businesses, and competition. That co-opetition is alive and well. And I think if you are very clear on a vision, there's a lot of times when customers and their suppliers, when competitors can actually get together because they share a vision, and they realize that if they're not working together, the market may never take off. And so I think that's a big point of inflection to ask yourself. Is this worth working with my competition? Because without them, we're never going to get the scale for this market to take off. Too many times, we all were brought up in the time that we're going to do it all ourselves. We just can't move fast and do it with scale by ourselves. But I think you have to be very thoughtful. There are times when you want to maintain your competitive advantage. There are times when giving up a bit of it to get the market faster, it's a good trade to have. Okay. Okay, Heather, thank you. I think, am I looking okay? And so I just take the questions, is that? Okay, we've got about 15 minutes, it looks like. I think we're on time, right? Okay. Thank you. Should we ready? Great. So hopefully you had a good conversation. Maybe you talked about how you apply some of what we talked about, or maybe you talked about what you're doing this weekend, but hopefully you had a good conversation. I have a bunch of questions. Oh, I actually have a microphone. I have a bunch of questions here. So I'm going to try to work through them and keep sending them. I think this is a great system. Yeah, I heard you release 75,000 patents. Tell me why, and how this is good. So this is a really good discussion. We didn't release 75,000 of them. We released several hundred of them. And we will probably do more in the sense of this. I think it speeds the opportunity for other innovators. You have to know in the end of the day what you're really good at. So we didn't release patents that we hadn't already looked at and figured out what are the applications that we can use. Look, we have an amazing network of research centers. Our global research capabilities are really an incredible asset at GE. We protect our breakthroughs, our IP that matters, like all of us, right? I mean, this is critical. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of breakthroughs that don't apply to us anymore. Either we thought it was going to happen or it doesn't. And so we've set up a pretty good licensing mechanism to understand what we value and keep and then license it to others. And our belief in releasing those patents was that it's a source of innovation for other people who might have a good idea outside of what GE can come up with it. We only have so much bandwidth. So why not turn it over to other innovators that might connect it to something they're working on, take a licensing stream from it, just to basically get a royalty from it, but let others innovate beyond what we can do. So that was basically the philosophy. We're seeing some interesting uptake from it. I mean, it's a bit harder in the consumer space. It's easier to do in the industrial space. But I think you're going to see more and more of this as a way to think of the platforms we all have. But again, it requires you to know what you're good at and have some confidence that there's innovation that just you're not going to do yourself. So somebody said, can you explain the growth chart? Maybe I need a little bit more explanation on what that's mean. So maybe you can text back with a little bit. I'm happy to dig into that. How does a small company start digitalizing? Where do we find talent or avenue? I'd say a couple of things. I think digitization is coming. I don't think everybody, stage one, needs to run out and build their own technology stack. Over time, you're probably going to have to. And I would say start to partner with many of the companies who are. Many of us, we've announced we're opening our industrial internet platform. It's called Predix. IBM's opened up access to what they're doing with Watson. You've got companies like Salesforce that are starting to open up their platforms. I think those are good ways to start. To find a few applications, to team with others who have some expertise. Again, back to the open IP, there's probably a good way to try it in an area that's not super competitive or super protected to you. That would be the first thing I would do to start. I think bringing in digital talent is complicated without a commitment to investing in them. But I would also bring in digital talent and ask them to solve a series of simple problems. I think asset tracking is a great place to start. Do you know where your stuff is? Can you be more efficient? Can you create more productivity, better throughput just by knowing where your stuff is? So find a simple solution you're trying to solve with, it's simple controls, sensors. You don't need a lot of sophisticated, but maybe hire a team that's able to create a simple vision that everyone can do. The other thing I always recommend to people is there's a lot happening in the connected consumer space. As I mentioned earlier, we've invested and partnered with a startup to do this. But there are a lot of, get a Nest. Get some of the powered by GE and Quirky things that are in Home Depot now. Get a connected lock from Schlage. The reality is if you start to experiment with this stuff in your home, we and Philips have connected light bulbs. These are interesting ways, because at first you're like, well, that's stupid. I mean, I can just turn my light bulb on and off with a switch. Why do I need to do it with my smartphone? But when you start to play around, you mean like if I close my garage door, then like the hall light comes on? Or if I turn my light off at night, then I can turn the security light on the backyard and I can make sure that this sensor's on and that, sort of if this, then that scenarios. I guarantee if you start to live with that a little bit, you start to think, wow, I see interesting ways this might apply to how we do things with data at work. So those would be a few easy steps, I think, to get your teams and get everybody a Nest. Just tell them you're going to pay for them to have a Nest thermostat and play with it and see how it changes their behavior. So those are just a few ideas, I think, for small companies. The race is on. Look, you're going to have no dearth of companies like mine trying to do business with you. And this isn't a sales pitch. I mean, Salesforce, there's a ton of companies out there, Accenture, so on, that are poised. You need to find, I wouldn't go to bed with any of these for the long term. Try a few experiments to see what you're comfortable with. Let me see. Can you name a recent failure that opened your eyes to real change? I mentioned this earlier, but let me expand on that. I think what's happened in the solar space was a real eye-opener for us. We have really amazing solar panel technology. I mean, our labs were killing it. But in the end of the day, it didn't matter for a couple of reasons. China killed it better. They brought the price down to a point where anything any other innovator was doing didn't matter. It put a lot of interesting capacity into the market. But we totally missed that the innovation was a frictionless experience for a small business and a consumer. If you have solar on your home, you don't want to sit and figure out, what panel do I get? How do I get someone to install it? How do I do the tax rebates? How do I finance it? So these companies like Sungevity, like Solar City, that have been able to innovate the solution, use financing to create the payback, that was an innovation that frankly we missed. And I think increasingly we're setting our radar for those kind of inventions. Elaborate on the comment of launching a minimally viable product early. This always makes people very nervous. In fact, one of our businesses said, can you change the name? That makes us really nervous that any of our customers would think we would launch a minimally viable product. I mean, we're an engineering powerhouse. What do you mean? And maybe that's what you thought. And maybe you're thinking, oh, that explains what GE's doing. But the idea of a minimally viable product, it's a way to just create with your customers. It's really as simple as that. And it's a way to, I'm not saying you're just going to put something that's horrible. You're just putting something that you and your customer can develop together. And this isn't going to work in every situation. It could be a business model. It could be a piece of hardware. But this idea of let's build it together, and you're going to need a certain kind of a customer. Not every customer is going to do this. In some ways, you're sharing risk and reward here because you're pricing it, if pricing it at all. Maybe you're saying to a customer, hey, let's develop this together. You give me time, access. I'll give it to you free. And if it works, we'll have a different kind of commercial relationship. But it basically is this idea of let's just get something out there, something good, okay? Let's start there. It has to be decent. It has to be good enough. It just doesn't have to wait to be perfect. How many times does your supplier show up and they're over budget, over time, and they've overpriced because they're giving you way more than you need? So that's the idea behind it, is get something out faster, get feedback, and iterate together. So that's how we think about that. What is the user interface to the Internet of Things? Complexity requires simplified interface to delivered value. This is such a great point. I think all of us, back to the earlier question, if you're a small company or a big company, all of us over time are going to have to invest in this user interface capability. At our software center, one of the biggest teams we have is a UX, a user experience design. I would offer that for many of us, as we're entering into these new offers, some of the easiest things we can offer is a simplified interface. We did this in the marine space, where we were able to take and integrate a lot of different pieces of equipment, ours and others. But the real breakthrough was, is there a simple way for the marine operators to access the data, to give only the data that's necessary, when they need it, to build the kind of algorithms to serve it up. So sometimes you don't need a lot of complicated back-end equipment. It's just that user interface. And I think that's a really great question. And then continuing on the IP, someone's asking, as a technology company, how do we protect our IP with organizations like Kaggle, Quirky, Local Motors? It's interesting, with Local Motors and Quirky, we've learned a lot about, as I said earlier, you have to know what you want to protect. You're not going to open yourself up. I mean, I mentioned GrabCAD. This was this is sort of a dumb part to us. It wasn't. I mean, we love our supplier. We love the part. It's essential. But it was dumb in the sense that we had kind of innovated it. There was nothing. We thought there was nothing left to do. And so the only solution was, wow, can 3D printing take us to a shape? Can we find someone who's good at metals that in a way maybe we're not? So it took us to that point. And so what was the IP? We paid the engineer for his concept, but the concept needed huge validation. It needed to be proven out in a physical form. So in this case, we rewarded him for the IP of a prototype. And so we're working through different models. In the local motors example that we're doing with First Build, we have quite a complicated IP sharing and reward system. And what you start to learn is that not every idea is the same. The impact of every idea isn't the same. Sometimes it takes hundreds of people to take that seed and make the real IP. You reward people differently. And to be honest, we're working our way through it. So for a really big breakthrough idea and has a long tail revenue, we're going to have to share that with people. For something that's a prototype that then inspires future design and inspires unique GE IP, we'll pay someone for the idea, but then the IP stays in-house. So those are some of the ways we're starting to think about it. I think I'm getting the high signs. So last question is, where do you find digital talent? And here would be the last thing I'd leave you with. In this physical meets digital world, there are a lot of people who have digital capabilities who love the kind of problems our industries are solving. They really do. And the opportunity, you've seen some of it here, the game technology, the augmented reality in service shops, the need to take the big data that comes off of our machines is a very enticing application. So we're finding a lot of traditional consumer software engineers really love the engineering world. That's why we ended up in San Ramon. I'd also say there's an incredible resurgence happening with entrepreneurism in many of our hometowns around the country. Detroit, Austin, Cleveland, Baltimore, New Orleans. The list goes on and on. We're starting to see these communities of digital-first people. They grew up largely in a digital world, wanting to stay home, realizing they can invent and create in Louisville. They don't need to move to Silicon Valley. And I would say perhaps the first way to start would be to open yourself up a little bit. Is there a challenge? You can create a weekend hackathon. Invite your local college or some of these local startups to hack a light problem for you. Do that a couple of times a year. You start to build a network. That might be a good way to get started. University programs are always a good one. And then maybe seed yourself with some of these incubators. Steve Case, formerly of AOL, has started a really great effort called Rise of the Rest. I'd recommend that as potentially a good way to tap into some of these hometown digital startups that are looking to solve your problems. So with that, hopefully this was somewhat helpful. It was really an honor to be able to share our story, and thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
Beth, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and very, very helpful. Now, who would like a break? It's that time, and if I refer to my digital clock here that Luke talked about, could we reconvene back in here, say, in 20 minutes, which would be roughly 10:25. Thank you.